I remember learning about this back when, because whenever it all happened for me, I was like really young. Back in 2001, like I think I was like 11.
We were 10 or 11.
Yeah, I was
we
like 11 years old whenever this happened for me. I still remember where I was for 9/11. I remember my grandmother like crying, saying this is Pearl Harbor all over again, which actually it was. I mean, if there was a more true statement to anything else than was my grandmother sitting there in tears and her being however old, and she's no longer with us, but she was like, this is Pearl Harbor all over again, which is honestly exactly what it was. Ironic. But to see how it's being taught now and how I viewed it and how I heard much later on in life, probably whenever I was 17, started hearing alternative views of it. And then really, whenever you get just a little, I mean, you don't have to spend too much time on this matter. I feel as though it's fairly easy that 9/11 is blatant. I'm pretty sure they did a poll, and it's over 50% of Americans that think that we were very much involved in 9/11. I can't exactly remember that poll, but no, it's just so scary. So now the problem that I have with that whole thing is, well, what about all the things that I was taught now in history class that I took so seriously, and about my patriotism and how I view this country?
That goes back to what we said earlier about them always lying to us.
Yeah, no. So now, how can I value anything? Because this is a corrupted source of information that I've been dealing with my whole life. So all this sense of, oh man, USA, like USA, how much can I actually hold true to that? Like it's a very frustrating, like difficult thing, and I feel it's almost cyclical. It's almost cyclical. Like, and just to hear young people talk about, man, these terrorists that did this and so awful, and it fuels this anger towards another race of people, which is so awful, and only like evil like that and corruption only begats much more evil, and then you have to be more corrupt to cover it up. That's what I've seen throughout anything. I watched this documentary called The Innocent Man. Not to go off on a fucking rant here, but and not to ruin it for anybody who hasn't seen it, because it's great. It talks about.
Don't go too much, because I haven't seen it. And
I won't ruin it for you. But what's really frustrating is you see this pattern that evil, corrupt people doing evil, corrupt things have to amplify their evil and corruptness the longer that they do it before they're stopped. It's only an amplified thing. So whenever you look at this span of time where this possible corruption could have been happening, and you start questioning things because you're like, man, this is blatantly, in my opinion, 9/11, there's no question. I'm like 60-40 on the moon landing. Like, yeah, I can get into that conspiracy theory a little bit about, there was some stuff here to where, yeah, we could have faked it, but I'm still not 100%. There's one thing I'm 100% on is 9/11. It's the fact that 9/11 and our government had our hands were deep in that whole thing. I'm 100% on that. I have watched too much, read too much, delved so deep into that, been angry at it, honestly, too long. But to now look back and be like, man, what else has happened? Because this is the formula. Once you have an evil, corrupt person and they get away with it, the only thing that they have left to do is to do not just the same amount, but even more, because this is how it works. So where we're at right now, it's almost frightening to look back and to see where we are now. So that's all I had to say. Not to go off on a rant like too hard, but
for what it's worth, I definitely agree with you on this. The government was definitely heavily involved, along with the Mossad, and I think the Pakistani ISI, which is heavily linked into the CIA. It doesn't matter. I mean, they are CIA for all intents and purposes. And no one can convince me otherwise. I have done far too. I spent an enormous amount of time looking into 9/11, more than I should have. It was from 9/11, 2001, and where I think I pretty much stopped was in 2006. So I spent about 5 years of my life looking into it. And anyone else who has done the same will come up with the same conclusions, because it's not intelligence. It's not, you need to have this IQ level to understand what you're seeing. It's just so blatant. It's so bold and naked and in your face once you start looking into it.
It's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, the one thing, 9/11 for me, because I've looked into it so much, because that was, like I said, I remember where I was for 9/11. Like, I wasn't alive for Pearl Harbor. in big, big terrorist attacks. So this one is really important to me because I remember that day. I remember everything that conspired afterwards. I remember that. So that one's very important to me, and I looked into it, and I'm like, man, once again, just like how I talked about the coronavirus, some things are almost too convenient.
But I think it's crazy how the Patriot Act went into effect, and now all of a sudden all the spying that they're doing on us is legal, too.
Yep, and by the way, I remember that, too. John Ashcroft was the Attorney General for Bush, and he was our governor. He got taken out of the governorship and basically became the Attorney General for Bush. He was the Missouri. You guys know John Ashcroft, or you've heard of him.
Yes, absolutely.
He toured the United States because everyone hated it. It was a stinkburger. No one liked the Patriot Act. So they lied about an enormous amount of it. John Ashcroft, who is a really, really good man, went to Washington and literally sold this thing on a tour. He went on a 3-month tour all around the United States selling the Patriot Act by saying the Electronic Surveillance Act only affects library records. Now, you guys are probably too young to remember him running around saying this, but he did. And it was a bold-faced lie. He lied. And we knew him as an honest man. I mean, shoot, he is famous for walking around Missouri Capitol and singing church hymns. I mean, this is a good man. I'm, a church-going man, a God-fearing man, an honest man. No one could ever say he was a liar when he was governor. No one ever had anything like that on him. But he went to Washington and he did this. And as soon as he got that thing to pass, he came up with stomach cancer. He had to leave. He got very sick. I think he saw what was going on in Washington, all the Satan worshiping going on in Washington, all the evil in Washington, all the psychopaths running around in Washington, and he literally could not take it.
It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of stress, and stress will put a lot of strain on your body.
Yep. And that's what I think happened with John Ashcroft. And believe me, these people, when they actually see these things and they hear the stories, they see the things actually happening, the worship, the Satan worshiping going on, and they're invited to participate. I think there's a general understanding. If you don't want to participate, that's fine. You keep your mouth shut. You keep your mouth shut because if you don't, something really bad's going to happen to your entire family first, so you can see how serious we are, and then we'll do it to you.
That's insane.
So yeah, I know, but that's the level of evil I think we're talking about in Washington, D.C.
There has to be like undercover good men or good women. Like there just has to be like a certain amount of good people that are infiltrating the system. Like it can't just all be bad, unless it is. And this is where it's led us to today. But
you don't remember now. You said yourself just a little bit ago, Paul, that these people have had 200 years of practice passing this information on to person. Believe me, they've got a system that defies infiltration. So I would submit to you that you might have good contractors, maybe, and you might have a good man like Ron Paul. He was a good man, but he had no power. He couldn't get anything done, but he was very popular in his district. So he kept getting reelected, and he did not partake in Washington stuff. He kept, he's a private man. So he didn't go to parties. He didn't go to this. He didn't go to that. He didn't go to galas. He didn't, rub elbows with the cream of society in Washington, D.C. In fact, lobbyists avoided him because they knew he was incorruptible. So they didn't waste their time. But he was one man out of 525 in Congress. So, that was the one man that couldn't be corrupted. That was the one good man you're talking about. Right there is Ron Paul. I don't know of any other good ones in there right now.
The other thing is I think that even if people were trying to do that, Paul, I don't think you're going to have good people being able to infiltrate due to the evil things that they would have to do to gain that power. You know what I mean? Like you're saying the good people infiltrating the system and like doing stuff for the right reasons instead of the wrong reasons. I feel like they're going to hit a wall where they're not going to make it any farther unless they're agreeing with these people who are doing
I disagree
the wrong things.
There has to be a time of internal sunshine. You know what I'm saying? Like there has to be that time where the winning person or the winning group, this world has to have a winning time is what I'm saying. Like we have to be in a day of glory. I feel like at least for a small
so
period
that's
of time.
That's on an emotional level. That's like someone who wants to, and I don't want to get too, I really don't want to like digress into this different thing, but that's like someone who wants to, for all intents and purposes, believe in heaven because there has to be something afterwards, right? There has to be something better. So I might as well assume that there is.
No,
You're believing that there has to be the ability for good people to get into place, but that doesn't necessarily make it so. I mean, if you want someone to, and I'm going to narrow this down, but you want someone to infiltrate this evil, I mean, even take undercover cops. You want an undercover cop to infiltrate something. Now, what if of a sudden they're asked to kill someone? Okay? Maybe they do it. Maybe they kill someone, so now they've infiltrated. Now, what if they're asked to do these other 13 illegal things and now kill 15 people? Maybe they do that. Maybe they do that and they get through. And then maybe they're asked to kill 100. Like, I'm using, this is a terrible example, but the point I'm making is they're going to hit a wall where if the people in power right now, a lot of people, are truly corrupt, truly evil, then the good people are not going to be able to infiltrate that.
I think it all starts with education, man. And I'm very powerful on that. I want to do a documentary on it. I want to get hard into education, man. I think that's where it all begins, honestly.
Unfortunately, the education system in the United States is corrupted beyond the point of repair. It cannot be repaired.
Pat, can you name an institution that isn't corrupted right now? Because I hate laughing at it because it's laughable. But any institution, the collegiate, you're right, political, media, even religious institutions. I mean, name one that isn't been like thoroughly corrupted.
Yep, you're right.
I would like to hear one that isn't.
No, that was a good question because I'd have to think about it. To actually come up with something that has some kind of wholesomeness associated with it. But the political taking over of the education system was absolutely paramount to their plan. And what is their plan? Obedient workers.
I mean, that's what
people that don't question. People that accept things as they are, people who don't speak out, people who will not go up to their state capital and say, we need to start taking our rights back from this tyrannical federal government. People who don't even know the Constitution, people who don't know their rights as delivered to them by the founding fathers in the first 10 amendments.
You make a great point there with the fact that we've said multiple times on this podcast when we're asked like, when we think, how would we fix something? No matter what it is, we think, how would we fix the financial institution? How would we fix this institution or that institution? At the end of our discussion, no matter whether it's 20 minutes or an hour long, at the end of our discussion, we always come back to the answer to fix it is education. Because if you fix it at that ground level, then it stems up from there. And the point you were making about that's the first thing they take over makes perfect sense. If they have control of us on that level, on the education level, everything else follows suit in the opposite direction, in the bad way.
Yep. I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you guys something to think about, which is the Federal Reserve, which I do know quite a bit about. And I've studied the Federal Reserve. I've studied their grip of power, which is absolute. Absolute. In fact, I suggest to you it was probably the Federal Reserve and the bankers that literally hatched the plan to kill Kennedy. And keep in mind, Kennedy wanted to get rid of the dollar. He wanted to get rid of the Federal Reserve and go back to the federal government minting its own money. Well, I'm going to tell you something here that I want you guys to actually stew on, which is if you get rid of the Federal Reserve, all the corruption goes away with it. All of it. It's all based on being able to print money out of nothing and get something of value out of it. That's what the whole corrupt system is based on. So actually the education system will literally fall apart anyway if you literally take away the Federal Reserve. You get rid of the Federal Reserve, all the manipulation of the money supply goes away too, and that affects every aspect of our lives. So people say, nonsense, how do we do this? Well, we can have a gold-backed currency like we used to have. That's what Nixon took away from us in August of 1971. We actually had, our money used to actually be backed by something. It is not anymore. And that is literally the fundamental basis of going to war. We couldn't afford it if we had a gold-backed currency. We literally could not afford to do what we're doing. In fact, we wouldn't be able to afford hardly anything we're doing right now if we didn't, have money printing out of nothing. And believe me, That's going on right now, started again in September, and we're going to start feeling that this year in big inflation. You guys will see it everywhere. It's going to be in the grocery stores. It's going to be in all the goods you buy. And the shutdown of China it's just lit the fuse, man. This is not going to be pleasant. We're going into some very bad times, and hopefully at the end of this, we all will have learned our lesson, and we'll never have another Federal Reserve again. We'll never have another central bank again. You guys understand the concept of this, don't you?
Yes.
The government actually borrows money from the Federal Reserve, and it has to pay it interest. That's why we pay taxes.
Oh yeah, we talked about this last
Our
time.
very first podcast we actually hit this very because that I don't know where it stemmed from, but we definitely went over this. But it should be gone over in almost every time that it can be brought up. So
it's
yeah,
an education that everyone needs. And but that's the end and be all of this whole thing is just get rid of the Federal Reserve. Go back to the government printing its own money and have it backed with something like gold. You don't have to do gold if you don't want to. Back it with platinum.
Just resources. You could do a conglomerate of resources, just something,
technology now. I mean, whatever you want to go down. But like there's documentation of JFK wanting to step away from the Federal Reserve.
Absolutely there was.
Well, there you have it. I mean, that answers anyone's question.
But he wanted to do a lot of things. He wanted to stop the moon race, and he wanted to cooperate with the Russians to share the expense and the risk. That pissed a lot of people off. He wanted to end the Vietnam War. That pissed off the military-industrial complex. I mean, there were a lot of people gunning for him. Trust me.
It's crazy how all the things that he wanted to do sound pretty understandable to a layman like myself.
He was the most for the people. He was the most for the people.
In the Vietnamese War, work together with, I know people don't like to hear the Russians, but work together with someone else in the world so that we can enjoy, space exploration and learn more. That basically, when I say space exploration, that just comes down to learning more in general, like a lust for knowledge in a sense. Everything that he said is, like Jesse just said, for the people.
Mm-hmm.
Which sadly is not what the focus of where the people in power, what they're worried about. They're completely worried about themselves, basically.
I'm curious about this Roy Blunt stuff that you went through, man.
Yeah, let's do that on a different podcast. That's about to tell the full story. It'll take roughly 45 minutes.
Damn, dude.
Real quick before,
go ahead.
Are you getting ready to?
I mean, I'm willing to go.
I just wanted to real quick bring it to just a lighter note, honestly.
That's what I was about to do.
Yeah, and which this isn't a real light note because there's still some deep thought there, but on a what's the word I'm looking for? Philosophy kind of level. This is very much a red pill, blue pill matrix kind of situation. In your opinion, Pat, and I have my own opinion, is it better to take the blue pill and just know all this stuff that we know right now about everything that we've talked about tonight, everything we've talked about, the corruption, the Federal Reserve, education, coronavirus, just all the evil out there that is probably not even real evil, but it's manipulated. It's not just natural. It's happening by people on purpose. Mm-hmm. Is it better to take the blue pill and worry about your friends and your family and just try to be happy and live in this world that they've created for us that's a bad world to live in? Or is it better to take the red pill and try to get everybody to fight against it, even if it makes your life a million times harder, so that people in the future can have a better life if we somehow break through this?
Okay. That's actually, for me, an interesting question with complicated answer. Now, this changes per person because you guys know that I have a Discord group that I'm a part of. And in that Discord group is Truth, Money, and Freedom is the name of it. And it's linked down below in all of my YouTube videos. And we talk about this kind of thing all the time. And we've had some very complicated successes and some very complicated failures with the wake-up process for people to understand certain things that are actual truths. And what I have found, first of all, for me personally, taking the red pill I thought would be easy. And it's not. It's a very hard thing to do.
Oh, no, there's no way.
And honest to God, I mean, I am so red-pilled, as a matter of fact, that I have a feeling, and especially because I've dealt with a lot of people who literally have no faith. What does that mean is no belief in a higher power. Have such struggles with this red pill stuff. I think that I probably, with all I know, I probably would have committed suicide if I weren't a Christian. And I'm just being straight up honest with you. Because it's a bitter pill, and you start to understand the entire system is against you. Your whole life is going to be a struggle. You have to find out, basically that if you really want to make it in this world, and I mean make it big, you've got to compromise all your values, all of them. And so that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. And those, there's crazy stories coming out of Hollywood about this. If you want to make a certain amount of money in Hollywood, you have to kill somebody. I'm sure you guys have heard these conspiracy theories before, that they just don't let you in the club unless you actually murder another human being. And I don't know if that's true or not, but there seems to be a little bit of truth around some of these really, really insane stories about what it takes to make it in the club. Now going back to your original question, I know people who take the blue pill because they literally can't take it. Even being exposed to the truth that is 9/11, a lot of people mentally can't wrap their head around it, that the government is willing to literally kill 3,000 people just to pass unpopular legislation. And that's exactly what they did. That's exactly what happened. How do I know this? What was the effect of 9/11? The effect was extremely unpopular legislation. Started with the Patriot Act, then the Patriot Act 2, the Military Commissions Act of 2006, followed by the National Defense Authorization Act signed by Obama, and that was December 31st, 2011. That allowed the government to actually kill U.S. citizens if they suspect them of being terrorists, completely bypassing jurisprudence, completely bypassing the entire process of charging somebody
And it's also
and
against the
letting them
Sixth
have their day in
Amendment.
court. Go ahead.
I was just saying that's also against the Sixth Amendment. I think it's the Sixth that says like due process and process by a jury and everything like that.
Yep. So that's hard enough for some people to swallow. If you start looking into the Rothschilds, you start looking into the royal family. And I'm Catholic, by the way, but I have absolutely no love for the Vatican or the Pope. And I'm just being straight up honest with you folks. I have no love for them whatsoever. They've been very damaging to society. They have protected pedophiles. And I don't know that anyone would argue that with me anymore.
Pat,
We've
I
had
think
too many problems. Go ahead.
Pat, I think that I used the phrase "festering scab" that needs to be lifted from the face of society when talking about the Catholic religion. So me personally, I'm right there with you.
Yep.
So-
And by the way, the average folks that go to church are not part of this. We're talking about the leadership of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, and I have a different opinion.
Catholics that go to church are good folks.
And I would love to sit down and have a
So-
conversation with religion. That's got to be left for a different day because I have a different viewpoint on that.
Sure.
Myself, I am fairly anti-religious. Personally, I consider myself a deist. Man-made
Okay.
religion. Yeah, not to even get into that at all. I should probably just let you talk more.
Yeah,
But-
religion can be for another
Yeah.
time.
No,
Bro,
for,
you guys can link up, man. Link
yeah,
up and talk about
no,
it.
absolutely. Man, I feel like I just cut you off right then, and I feel really
No,
bad
no,
about
that's
that.
okay.
Yeah, I feel really bad.
So that's okay. And so to finish up the thing about the red pill, blue pill, some people, I'm just going to say, to shorten this up and to end it, some people I don't think can handle the red pill. And some people can. The blue pill, I know people personally that have taken the blue pill. They literally don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. La, 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 get away from me.
See, I think
It's
so,
Orwell.
you guys
It's Orwell,
probably-
man. It's everything Orwell talked about. Like that's
So what?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll leave it at this, man. Like, what are your thoughts? I don't know if you listen to the podcast, that Johnny and I and Jesse did about the 8 different, like just the United States splitting off into 8 different countries, because I think we're to a point now, and China's probably the greatest example of how it turned into communist or whatever you want to call it, with however many billions of people that live there. But even 320 or 350 million people is way too many. I think that maybe we're at a point in time where we need to break off and just be separate, man. Like,
well, and yes, I would agree with you. In fact, I think there's a plan to separate the United States into 5 different countries. And that's something that probably was envisioned back in the 80s. I'd have to go back and check my notes on this. This is when I was investigating, the powers that be, the Illuminati, the people who run nations, and who controls them. And that's where I came across this research. The thing is, and it's very, very easily figured out, is we are far, far too divided to be a united nation anymore.
That's exactly what the point that I made during that podcast.
Yeah.
And there's no healing it. People literally don't want to change. They don't want to accept truth. You see, that's when you go back to the red pill. If everyone took the red pill, believe it or not, everyone would understand the true evil in this country, which is bankers and politicians. And they would go after them. They would, make short work of it too.
Right.
And
fairly
then
simple,
we
honestly.
could actually start to heal.
But
Bankers and politicians will not have that.
I
They want us divided.
I remember Paul wanted to censor a podcast that I did. This had to have been like 6 months ago. But I was like, man, whatever happened to corrupt people in power who took advantage, like them being brought out to a square and being hung? And you're like, after the podcast,
No,
Paul,
it was because you said something. Someone
I
said
think
something about hanging the
it's-
press. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I said, okay, I might have been like a little bit too specific, but I was like, man, if you can really prove this level of corruption, where's the justice on our part? Like, whatever happened to
Well, Look at the guy who went after.
I'm sorry I
Hillary
brought it back
Clinton,
up, Paul.
Seth
I
Rich.
can see it in Paul's face right now, by the way. He's like, man, quit. He's like,
No,
there's a reason why I
no.
told you not to say that in the
No,
first place.
I know
was
you're
like,
not
whatever happened to that?
I know you're not going to go as deep as you went the last time. It's
Yeah, my bad. I should probably just stay
actually,
away from
Jesse,
it.
you just brought up a great point. Look at what happened to Seth Rich. He went after Hillary Clinton because he was supporting Bernie, and he saw through DNC emails that Hillary was taking away primaries from Bernie. He wanted to expose it, and then he got shot in the back of the head. And
I've never
no
heard anything
one
about
is
this.
investigating this.
I have never even heard.
you didn't know
anything
about the
this.
DNC stealing everything? Like the fact
No,
that,
no, I heard about this. I didn't know anybody got shot.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah,
Many
he's
people.
killed. He was dead. And the guy was like 32 years old. He worked at the DNC. I'm not sure if he was a paid employee or a volunteer, but he is the one who literally leaked all the DNC emails to WikiLeaks,
Okay.
and he was murdered for doing that. And I submit to you, the reason he was murdered was not because of literally the stealing of primaries from Bernie. That's not what angered Hillary. What angered Hillary was all the Satan worshiping and the pedophilia that was going on in those emails. And that was the quote unquote private emails. Remember now, Hillary said she turned over all of her work emails, and it all became about, oh, you accidentally sent on like 60 emails that were classified. And that's what the whole narrative changed to. The actual story was all the Satan worshiping with John Podesta and his brother in their church, and also all the Pizzagate stuff. That's what Hillary was trying to hide.
Which those emails are legit, right? Like you
Yes.
literally see emails of Hillary emailing
But the
back John,
unfortunate thing-
and they're talking about like pizza and like, dude, it's just weird.
Yep. Well, this is the unfortunate part, and this goes back to when I'm talking about psychopaths and sociopaths and choosing a path of whether or not you're gonna literally get paid off or you're gonna probably get killed. Is the New York City Police Department actually got Anthony Weiner's laptop, which was one Huma Abedin was using to back up the email server. So they had corroboration of all the emails from WikiLeaks on that laptop. It went to the New York Police Department, and it was never spoken of again.
Man, that's almost like too much too quick for me to even process. Like
See,
everything
this
you
is,
just
this
said.
is red pilling. This is hardcore red pilling
Yeah.
right now. But this is all true. And the New York Police Department is part of this giant ball of corruption and evil. And believe it or not, the Church of Satan that they go to, which is John Podesta's brother, I can't remember his name, is in New York, and he is very well respected. But he is the high priest in the church in that particular chapter of Church of Satan in New York City, and so they're tied into the police department as well. I mean, there's child molestation and child murder. There's all kinds of stuff going on in New York. And it's all covered up, and it's covered up on every level. It's covered up with the police, with the courts.
Okay.
With the politicians.
So real quick, Pat, just for the listeners who are listening to this and probably are like, what the fuck are you guys talking about right now? Like, this is completely outlandish, because we've gone really far right now with what you're talking about. And this has been brought up, I want to say, this is probably like the third time that I can remember that this has been brought up as far as child pedophilia and child murder. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I always have to bring up is what happened in England, which is very well documented, to back this up, because you're talking about whether or not you can prove this right now as far as what's happening currently is probably all being covered up. So there's this is a lot of conspiracy theory right here that we're talking about.
You're talking about Jimmy Savile.
The Jimmy Savile incident that happened in England, which is extremely well documented, that it happened in England amongst high political officials. And it was uncovered entirely that there was the death boats and the child molestation through his hospitals that he ran. This is a very well documented.
He funded.
So that he funded.
But
so
why was
I always have to mention that one, that happened in that high political institution. That this is very well documented that it happened. To think that it can't happen here
is absurd.
Absurd. So I need to, you know what I mean? Like, I have to validate it. Anytime that it gets brought up, and especially on this, because it feels a little bit I'm trying to put myself in the viewer's position right now, Pat, as to trying to listen to all this, and it's got to be a lot for them. I need to talk about Jimmy Savile and everything that happened in England, that this happened over there, and this is very well documented, that these things happened amongst these high-ranking officials. So that's kind of I always have to say that anytime that this subject gets brought up, to kind of verify because what we're talking right now is conspiracy, to verify that. That's all I had to say. And I should go deeper into that, but I know I just had to bring that. I just had to bring that up. Anytime that gets brought up, I have to bring that up.
Continue.
Okay. Well, Jimmy Savile, and by the way, I'm glad you brought him up, because we started talking about him the last time, but then the subject changed. This is the important part. Now, you brought up in the last podcast the fact that he was a DJ. He was famous. He was rich. He was very popular as a DJ. He funded children's hospitals. He got the hospitals to let him have rooms in the children's wards, and then he would be molesting the kids in those rooms. And this is, as you said, extremely well documented. Now, what you'll also find that's extremely well documented is that everyone in power knew about him and knew what he was doing. Now, here's what's going to blow your mind. He spent every single Christmas, when Margaret Thatcher was prime minister, spent every Christmas with her. Now you're thinking to yourself, okay, we're talking about an extremely conservative, anti-socialist, Christian woman that ran England for 12 years. And the answer is yes. I'm talking about the same one. She was using him to get dirt on all of her opponents. That's how she was the Iron Lady. She had dirt on everybody through Jimmy Savile. That's it. So she had no problems using his information to control her opposition. She didn't turn him in. She didn't stop him from molesting kids. She didn't, set up some kind of sting operation. No. To her, it was intelligence. This is how sick these people are at the top. It's about controlling their opposition. Like, for instance, I've been very critical of QAnon. Are you guys familiar with the concept of QAnon?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
It's been almost, I would say, frustrating.
Yeah.
For me personally.
Okay.
I'm
not gonna throw any shade here or anything. We had someone from a part of QAnon.
Just go back and listen to the Jason Q podcast. Pat. It's on
Jason Q.
Jason.
Okay.
He's
We have a
huge into
podcast
it,
that
man.
involves someone from QAnon.
It's like
Yeah,
a
which-
2-hour podcast, man.
Man,
Just listen
I
to
hate
it.
even the fact that we're promoting that one right now.
No, I'm not going to promote him. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys just a very simple critical thinking exercise about Trump. And we did a podcast about Q about a year ago, and it was a critical thinking exercise. There were 6 participants to try and figure out what Q was or what he represented. But the Q folks keep saying Trump is going to drain the swamp, but he has been bogged down with all of these diversions. For instance, Russia, impeachment, whatever else. I can't remember whatever else. But so he can't drain the swamp and start going after these pedophiles because he's too busy with impeachment. So he can't literally save children's lives, literally save their futures. He can't do that because he's too busy with Russia, the Russia investigation. If this is true, those Q people should know that Trump should burn in hell for even taking a second away from trying to save the kids. If Trump were a Christian, as he claims, it should be his very first priority, is saving the kids from being literally molested, raped, and then killed. This is a very sick subject. I understand this, guys, but I think we're all very passionate about this. We're going to be judged by this. And it doesn't matter if you believe in a God or not. God will judge us, or history will judge us by letting this pedophilia go on and on and on, because we were comfortable. We had food on the table. We all had jobs. We all had things to do. We were entertaining ourselves with our cell phones. And the president was too busy because, the Democrats were going after him on Russia, going after him, trying to impeach him. And no one was there for the kids. And I know the Q folks would say to me, nonsense. They got Epstein. Epstein was just a player. He didn't run the pedophile network. He didn't run it. I know a lot of people said he did because of Ghislaine Maxwell. But the fact of the matter is, he was just a player in that network, working for the CIA and Mossad to get dirt on politicians and celebrities. That was his role. So he put them in situations where they were sleeping with underage kids. So he could literally get their attention for the CIA to do something, or for the Mossad to do something, particularly politicians. This is what happens. This is what they're using that pedophile network for. And no one is shutting it down.
Well, it's because they're in power. They're in power. They're in control. They've been in control for such a long time. What would it take to shut them down? For Epstein to get caught and for whatever happened to him, and he committed suicide, whatever that means or not, like what does that even mean?
Yep, I understand this. This is going to sound rudimentary, and it doesn't make sense without a longer conversation. Get rid of the world's central banks, and this problem goes away.
And I really like that fundamental idea. No, Pat, that fundamental idea to me, you talk about, there's probably some other smaller goals that need to happen before then.
No,
but, you're talking about the big one. I really do. I think you're talking about the big one.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other things that probably are more easily achievable, like what you like, not to full circle and all the way back, but what we're doing here in Missouri with getting this legislation passed, at the fact that we are separating ourselves as a state and saying we are not just going to bow down to this federal government and this, that we are our own governed state, and this is very, very important. So like small steps like that is what I'm saying.
For sure.
To go full circle.
More achievable than
to go first. You have to, the Federal Reserve one, that's fucking huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'll ever see it in my lifetime. I'm 29.
You will.
I would love to see it in my lifetime. And I also have this, it gets really dismal. It should be talked about, but I know this is super depressing topics.
That's the whole red pill thing, though, is that everything gets dismal when you go down that road.
It's very dark, and it's very dark. And I feel as though I need to bring this up anytime that we get to this level on the podcast, which we have a handful of times.
What's that?
Because people who listen will be depressed. Because whenever I hear things like this, and whenever I start researching things like this, I myself become very depressed, and the world seems so dark. and so dismal.
Well, we all shouldn't feel depressed, man. We should all feel something different.
So this is what I always like to say, is that it is very important that you know that you are still in control of your life and can have a massive effect on what happens around you. And I mean, even in the smallest things, holding a door open for someone, smiling at someone, being polite, and trying to be the best human being that you can be. Because like I said, I've been down this route before, and I felt very depressed after, like, the Jimmy Savile documentary and even the 9/11 information that I was reading whenever I was 19, like literally 10 years ago, and I was feeling like the world is just this abyss of darkness, and you feel so pulled into it. How can I get out of that feeling? And what always has resonated with me is this idea that I am still in control of who I am, who Jesse Westbrook is, this individual in front of the mic right now, and what I can do for somebody else, holding a door open, like spreading information, connecting with people, smiling, helping somebody out who's in need. You do these small things, they will resonate farther. It's like a ripple effect you can do.
Bro, those things still happen in China. Like, do you not think that people in China... Hold on. You went on this long tangent. Do you not think that stuff like that happens in China, even though it's communist or whatever it is? Those people aren't still doing nice gestures and opening doors for like this shit still happens, bro. We're losing that shit at an alarming rate.
No, but
one thing you're right about is the fact that in Missouri, Pat, what you were doing and you're on the forefront on is us keeping our Second Amendment rights. And which, by the way, I have a question to ask you. We had Mike Anderson on 2 weeks ago, and he made a good point that I didn't really even think about, was the fact that in the Second Amendment, it says it's the right to bear arms. It doesn't say that individual people have rights to own guns. It has to do with
you're talking about the militias.
Right.
No. That's kind of two separate statements. But go ahead with your,
for sure.
your stuff, Paul.
But what I'm saying is, like, all that shit's happening everywhere, man. Like, what I'm saying is, you're right that like I said, Pat, what you were doing and what many other people that you mentioned in early on in this podcast are doing, that is huge. That is monumental. I agree with that. Like, that is making an impact. Yes, I will open the door for someone at the bank. 100%. I will. Paul. Like, I will be that nice, polite person. No, there's no Paul. There's no Paul here, man. Like, this, what Jesse's describing, that shit's happening everywhere. But it's to the point now where it has to be bigger steps, man. Exactly what this bill is in Missouri.
I agree.
You're 100% right that it has to be bigger steps.
What I'm talking about is whenever you start delving deeper into what's really happening, and you really pull back the curtains a little bit and you see things, it becomes very dismal and dark and depressing. And you can get pulled into this dark and depressing thing. But what I always like to remind people of is that you are in control of your own life, and that if you just, even the smallest things, to where you respect other people and you're polite and you help out your fellow man, you'll end up seeing that it's not nearly as dismal, because you're putting in work that is necessary to better the world. Because a lot of people are like, oh, what can I do to, reform this legislation? Oh, I'm a peon, right? Like, I'm a peon. I'm so small. I'm a grain of sand in comparison to all these political bullshit that's happening. I'm saying that do what's necessary around you that's so close to you to where you can help out and benefit other people. And I think that it brightens up the world a little bit, especially around you, whenever you can be a positive influence on people. And that's all I wanted to say, because I've been down that road and it gets very depressing. But to remember that you're in control of your life, and that you can influence so much just being a good person, helping those in need, treating other people as though you would want to be treated. I know I'm quoting the Bible right now. But just things like that, so that there is some light there. It's not this dismal, because I know that I've just been down that path, and I know it gets really dark whenever you start going down that road and uncovering things about the government.
For sure, man.
So that's all I wanted. That's all I wanted to.
I get that.
That's all I wanted to say.
Real quick, Paul. I think that you guys were just
individuals are still in control.
I think that you were just talking about different things. I don't think Jesse is saying that making these small gestures will change the world, or will. You're right. There are bigger things that are more important, like the Federal Reserve and everything else. You guys are talking about different things. What he's talking about is staying sane during these dismal times. During the dismalness, you do these small gestures to stay sane and not fall into this dark pit.
Hold on. That's human nature, man. Like, most human beings will always do that. They always do those things, like, just so we can feel human. Like, yes, there's a small percent of the people who run this world that are evil, and they've been evil and they run what we live in. But you're not, like what Jesse just described, like that's never going to go away. Like, we are human beings. We love each other. We want to be around each other. We want to have a community. We want to do these big things. We want to take over the world and make it beautiful. Like, that will never go away.
I don't think he was saying that it was.
No.
I know he wasn't, but hold on.
I'm
Pat,
just saying.
Pat, hold on, Pat, what do you got to say, man?
Pat. I'm
Okay, once again,
We get a little. That
I found
happens
that
every once in a while.
fascinating.
That
Go
happens
ahead.
every once in a while.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And by the way, I want to echo what Paul said, and even what John had said, and what Jesse said, and what you guys collectively said without saying it, and you may not have connected the dots yet, is that human beings need to be connected. They have to be, because without that, we lose our humanity. And that's, I think, what you all were getting to, and you're all different, different ways, different perspectives. Now, we talk about how we're moving away from that, and that is literally through electronics and narcissism. When I was a kid, and I'm a little bit older than you guys, narcissism, I mean, no one hardly knew the word. That was a word that you didn't hear very often. People helped each other out. Kids in the neighborhood would go rake the elderly parents' or elderly neighbors' yards all the time with leaves or grass or whatever. They didn't think anything of it. There was no asking for reward. But usually, the elderly woman would make cookies and have milk and invite the kids over, for cookies and milk for doing a good job or whatever. That's gone. That's history now, because everyone's time is worth money. And so that's what we've taught our kids. If you're going to do something nice, you better get paid for it. And if you do it well, you should get paid for it. So, but the narcissism being bred is literally through this participation trophy crap that they're getting fed in the public schools. That's, everyone's a winner. No, that's not true. We have winners and losers. And the beautiful thing about that system, that old system that everyone says we can't have back, is that it made kids strive to be better. They don't have to strive to be better because they get a trophy for coming in last place now. There's no purpose in getting better. What's wrong with, having a trophy for the best one and no one else gets a trophy? Well, we can't do that because that hurts their feelings. So now we're getting into political correctness. Political correctness is ending up being the worst thing that ever happened to our culture. It's, stealing from the kids, the ability for them to literally self-improve. There's no room for self-improvement anymore. There's only room for them to feel good about themselves all the time. So maybe that plays far too much into the point that you had stated, but that's kind of the way I see the way society has gone.
I almost don't want to. I agree actually with that. This has nothing to do with that. I was going to say I almost don't want to go further into the sense of like I kind of want to wrap it up because if we don't, I could talk like Pat. The conversation's great. The conversations that we're having is great. But I mean, we could drag this out for 3 hours, and I don't want to do that.
One day we might do a 4-hour podcast.
We might do like a live stream 4-hour podcast or something. But for right now, for what we're doing,
yeah.
I feel like we've talked about so many subjects, all of which are important, by the way. Every single one is important in some way, shape, or form. And I feel like we've talked about too much for this to stay focused almost.
Yeah.
We're no longer focused.
No, I mean, I think the podcast in which we talked about, I think a lot of it was very nice and good information, man. Like, Pat, you bring a lot to the table, man. I'm glad through the grapevine that I found you, and I'm very thankful for that, man. Because
you've been an absolute blessing.
Yeah.
Like 100%, man.
I forgot. We didn't even, since this is the second podcast with you, we never brought up the like thanks for the shout out and everything on your channel.
Dude.
Oh yeah, man.
that video.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, gang.
Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
Yeah, it's
we
been so
appreciate
long
it.
since that. It feels like it's been so long since that. Like we were thinking about it for a couple of weeks afterwards, and then we just
Yeah.
never got around to getting back to you. But like that was huge. You putting that up on there, saying that you're not gonna upload it because you wanted us to get big.
Yeah,
Appreciate
send the
that.
traffic
We really
to you
appreciate
guys.
that.
Absolutely.
I was outside smoking a cigarette at work, actually, and I saw that video pop up, and I'm a general manager at a Mexican restaurant, so I don't have much time when I'm at work. But when I saw that pop up, man, I was like, I have to watch this video in its entirety, and I did, and I was like, Jesus Christ.
People were like, "Where are my burritos?" And Paul's like, "I am doing shit right now."
Yes. I instantly send that video to Jesse and Johnny, man. gratefully, I mean, Jesus Christ, thank you, Brian, for allowing us to meet fucking Pat, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I've enjoyed it too, gang. And I know we covered a lot of very interesting things that may have been, somewhat off topic. But I do encourage you guys to look up anything that you heard that you found interesting or impossible to believe, because the information is very easily accessible on everything that was mentioned tonight, particularly on the coronavirus, or even Jimmy Savile, which is a fascinating study. So, Jesse, thank you for bringing up Jimmy Savile again. That way I was able to get my information about Margaret Thatcher with him in, because that's an important aspect of Jimmy Savile. His actions were approved by government.
Yes.
That's how sick and sad this whole thing was.
Yes, it is well documented. That's what I always say anytime that gets brought up, and I'm like, people listening to it go, "Oh, that's bullshit, conspiracy theory." It is the one
that one's proven. That one's
absolutely proven thing that needs to be brought up anytime you talk about things that's happening within the United States government, and that you can, if it happened over there, how can you tell me that it can't happen over here too?
Yeah.
Because you look at the...
No, it's definitely happening.
So you almost have to bring that up, in my opinion.
But
it's...
Pat, if you don't mind shooting me that Ellie chick, or any of the 5 dudes that you mentioned earlier, or 5 girls or gals...
Was it Ellie 1973?
Yeah. Well, either way...
1978.
Any of those people,
1978.
of the 5 guys that you said have a big movement in what's going on in the Missouri legislation, if they have a YouTube channel, man, will you please send me a link to their YouTube channel via email, and I'll forward that to Johnny, man. It'll be in the description below. So
Okay, gotcha. No problem. I'll get that done. And Chris Martinson and Mike Maloney, and the videos that I was talking about relevant to the coronavirus and the shipping lines being shut down. This is important. And then on top of which, his investigation into the proteins on the virus. That's very important too. That way people can see that we're just not talking out of our butts here. There is some information backing up. Even though there is a little bit of speculation, there's still a lot of evidence to go along with that speculation.
100%.
So
Absolutely.
I want to thank you guys for having me back again. And like I said, I would love to come back if you guys will have me, and we'll keep it a little more focused next time. We'll take like 2 or 3 subjects, and then we'll have a referee in case we get off.
I was going to say
tangent.
that's my only thing.
time.
No, I love the conversations we have. I really do. But from looking at it from a not to let people see behind the curtain here, but looking at it from a production perspective. Like, we have to stay focused on 3 things, or else it becomes...
I disagree, man. I think we had a lot of good subjects tonight.
No, they were all good.
They were all good. You shed a lot of factual information. So did Jesse. So did Johnny. So did I, man. We don't... If we want to go down that route, that's fine. But that's neither here nor there. We'll talk about it next time. Pat, thanks for joining, man. I really appreciate it.
And
You bet.
You're an absolute blessing.
one more time, you want to
to
throw out where people can check you out, and I'll put a link in the description. We'll have a link to your YouTube channel up somewhere floating above Paul's head right now, if you're watching this.
Okay, gotcha. All right, we're Truth, Money, and Freedom Podcast. And I like to say it's my channel all the time because it's easier, but I do represent a larger core group of people, and that's Truth, Money, and Freedom on Discord. If you go to any of our YouTube actual videos, you'll find in the description down below a link to our Discord group, and you can come in and chat with us. It's a voice Discord. It's also text. So you can do either. You can talk to us, or you can just type with us. But that's pretty much it. And we do the same thing you guys do. We're basically just trying to bring the truth out. But it's really more on the financial and political side is where we spend most of our energies. And there's a reason for that. And maybe that would be a great setup for the next podcast, which is the financial collapse and the wealth transfer. I think that would make an excellent podcast. So people can get on the right side of it ahead of time to make sure that when this financial system comes down, and it will mathematically, they can be on the right side of it so they're not squashed by it and their family doesn't starve to death.
I want to know where to
Sounds
put
good.
my money.
Yep,
some
there you
light,
go.
man. Shed some light. I want to know where to put my money.
Well, I'll give you a heads up here. Precious metals and cryptocurrencies. And the only reason I say that, and this isn't some sort of weird bias that your guest has, it's because they're the only undervalued assets. That's why. That's the reason why.
It'll be.
We find out
money
8
will
years
flow.
from now that Pat owns 80% of all cryptocurrency and precious metals, and he's just been pushing his agenda of getting
no.
everybody to buy into it.
Oh no.
No, I'm just kidding, Pat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
no,
a
that
joke,
was
man.
good. That
Just
was
just
good.
a joke.
Rock on, man. Well, thanks for joining, man. We'll hit you up soon.
You bet. God bless you guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Pat.
Cheers.
Love you, Pat. Love you, Pat.
Love you too, guys. Take care.
Love you, man. Later. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Man, fucking Pat from Truth, Money, Freedom. Another great podcast. Me, Jesse, and Johnny. Fucking Pat, dude. Let's go, man. That's awesome.
That was a roller coaster for me. Where it started out and where it ended up being. I I couldn't ask for a better podcast.
Same.
We have so many good people that come on here, man. It's not even Pat.
Hey, by the way,
but
sorry.
it's so many people we have on here.
I mean, we're at the 2-hour mark for anyone who's made it this long. We have a lot of good things in the works. Next week, we actually have Joe from Psychedelics Today, who's going to be joining our show next week. Right around, Johnny will upload it, all that shit, but we're going to be talking about psychedelics, its effects on the human psyche and its benefits and what it means. All that good stuff. We have another person who's going to talk about the Constitution coming in deep. We got Brian Forster coming on late March, dude.
This is the most lit
Paul,
podcast has been, man.
is psychedelics next week?
Psychedelics is next week.
Okay, so yeah, anybody out there, if you are, if you're like wondering if you're pro drug, if you're against drugs, if you're just curious about psychedelics or anything like that, that's what we'll be covering next week with some people who are experts on the subject.
100%, man.
We'll be going over it.
Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification to all our junkies out there.
Stay fly and ring the bell.